It's a process of becoming very discerning about what voice is the intuitive voice and which one is the saboteur
Yes.
or the voice of fear. And once there's that clarity, it's a lot easier to follow the intuition because you can make a distinction between what voice is really the calling that has a sense of expansion and forward movement, and which is the voice that is causing confusion.
I'll have what she's having.
Welcome to another edition of
She talks with confidence.
Podcast.
Welcome back. It is Tony, your host. This is the She Talks Confidence Podcast, as usual, and I have an amazing guest. I'd like to welcome today an author, a memoirist, the CV is miles long, but I'll let her tell you about it. It's Rhia Kujat. Rhia, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I can't wait to get into this because you have a fascinating origin story coming from the hard sciences and then moving into really soft science and energy and transformational stuff. So I'm going to go through a quick intro and then from there get into your origin story a little bit. And then I really want to talk about your book being Life's Poetic Glossary. And we'll go into that right after this. But what I'd like to do is talk about you. You are an award-winning writer, memoirist, and educator whose work celebrates connection, authenticity, and the beauty of living boldly. You were born in Calgary, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Your career started as an environmental scientist before transitioning into acting in New York City, trauma therapy, and founding Veritas Vista, a retreat business in Northern California. That's a huge shift that I want to get into. But before that, there's one quote from your book that I'd like to say. Your approach to education and empowerment is focused on liberating oneself from inherited patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you how much of my work that I do with women is based just on that.
It's huge.
Right?
Yeah, it's really huge to untangle all the wiring that we all have. So I have had many career transitions, as you've highlighted so eloquently. I started in the sciences because I had just a voracious passion to save the environment. I got my degree in environmental science. I worked for government for a while and then for a multinational pipeline company in Canada in the environmental department. And it was a lot of paper pushing, and I really didn't feel that my passion was really moving the needle forward in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found it really depressing, actually, and soul sucking. And I felt I had all of these. I've always been multi passionate. So I danced from a young age, I played piano, and I also always did what made sense, which was like getting my degree and getting a job after. And I came to a point where I had always felt a calling inside to be an actor. So I took the leap. I let go of this corporate job that I had. I moved to New York. And once I made the decision, pieces fell into place pretty easily, but it took a lot of courage to take that leap. And I followed an artistic career for many years in New York as an actor primarily. And I had many jobs to support that lifestyle. And then eventually I had a major life turning point that was really the segue into becoming a trauma practitioner and also family constellation facilitator, which is dealing with inherited family patterns and systemic patterning that we all carry to some extent. And it was profoundly liberating for me to have those modalities in my own life and to free myself from what I had adopted unconsciously in terms of beliefs. And that really affected me on a physiological level. Like I had been shut down from my sensual self almost entirely. And I just was so unaware of all these fears that lived inside of my body. I just thought it was normal. So once I entered that gateway, then I had another career change, and my passion for transformation just kept on blossoming. And that eventually led me to open a retreat house in Northern California. And that was wonderful because I could use many parts of my creativity. I'd always worked in real estate on the side, so I was able to really harness that wheelhouse as well as my creative wheelhouse to design beautiful space and create experiences for people that offered transformation. And above all, the place was really about creating a beautiful and safe space to do
Mhm.
important work in groups. Then that was my last vocation before COVID, and many circumstances led me to sell that business. And then I was free to live around the world for a couple of years, and I just dedicated myself to following my bliss, following my intuition, and writing poetry. And that's where the inception of this book came along.
There were a couple major notable events there, but that I heard.
Yeah.
The first one being and I wrote it down even, what made sense, which is every client that I've ever dealt with,
Mm.
that's the path that they go on. And then there's a level of unfulfillment. There's a level of not feeling as though you are in your authenticity. You're
Yeah.
not living in your authenticity. The made sense thing, was that what you grew up in, what the expectations were, what the boundaries were, what the family wanted, what you got dialed into in regards to taking care of yourself? What was the
Yeah.
origins of that?
Yeah. So, in my upbringing, and definitely I was influenced by my parents to go to school, get my degree, and then once I had my degree, to get a job. That was just the thing that made sense according to them. And ironically, I was also shown another side to that coin because my dad is a German immigrant to
Hmm.
Canada. And so he had a grade 8 education and became a very successful entrepreneur. So I also saw another side to the coin of what made sense, which was to, live outside the box and really work hard, work your ass off to
Hmm.
follow whatever the dream is. So I had these two influences or these two voices. My mom, which was more the voice of get your degree as a woman, the world needs more scientists. And so that makes sense,
It does. She's not wrong. That's a good point.
wrong. And
Yeah.
it, in some ways, when I look back on my life now, all of those steps that I took were never lost because that education and building those muscles of learning in a structured way and also working hard in a structured way, those influences that I got from my parents really did serve me in many areas afterwards. And it was also very much, as you said earlier, a crossroad of reckoning with what was not feeling aligned inside and congruent, and where was I feeling like I don't belong on this path that
Mhm.
I'm following and that's been set out for me. And if this isn't the path, what is the path?
Right.
And then that soul searching that ensues from that, it takes some rigor because
Huh.
yeah,
Yeah. That's yes.
because it's really being able to cultivate a stronger connection with what's true inside than what's modeled on the outside in the places where we feel the most sense of belonging and security, which is the family unit.
Mhm.
For me at that stage, which was in my mid 20s, it took a lot of rigor to be true to that calling, to that inner voice that I felt was stirring. And I could just feel there's something beyond this. And I wanted to find out what that was. And I wanted to, in a way, follow those little breadcrumbs.
Mhm. I
So,
think it gets glossed over a lot when I get clients that come in, and I've heard many women talk about the fact that I've wasted my life so far, or I took the wrong path, and look at all this time that I've wasted. Like you had said, and I completely agree, it's not about time being wasted. It's about looking at it from the perspective of this needed to happen in order for me to get here. It's like going into the house, and when you want to go to the kitchen, you still have to go through the living room. You
yeah,
don't want to be in the living room. You
yeah,
want to be in the kitchen, but you have to go through the living room first to get to the kitchen. And it's
yeah,
the same thing. Then that leads to the intuitive calling, right? That voice that finally it started as a whisper, or was a whisper. You were going through your process of being a responsible adult. And I did use air quotes there. then going into that process and still not feeling psychically comfortable, if you want to call it that way, not feeling aligned with yourself. What was it that finally got you to make that switch? Was it one thing, or was it like a straw that broke the camel's back type of thing, and like the millionth straw finally did it?
Mm. It was many things. And it was I would say, a pretty conscious process because I was very aware of my fear of not feeling financially secure, which
Hmm.
I think is something a lot of people can relate to, especially those of us who do have an artistic calling or a calling that isn't readily financially stable, so to speak. And there were two things running where I wanted to save enough money.
Hmm.
And that was part of my mentality at the time. And then the other part of it was really just calling out for myself, where are my fears? And I was doing a book that's very, I would say, even famous these days, The Artist's Way. And I was
Oh
doing
yeah, I love that book.
I love it too. And
Yeah,
I
it's
did it during
fantastic.
COVID. It was phenomenal for helping me to stay true to that calling that I had as a storyteller and as an artist, as an actor. So, in answer to your question about what were some of the guideposts that
Hmm.
pushed me to take the leap, one was sitting in a board meeting with 10 of my teammates, and we're going through the usual Monday inventory of what we all have to do next and how the things went last week. And I had this image of everyone getting up to dance on the table and breaking out into song and dance. And I just thought, this is not I'm in the wrong world. I keep doing this and dancing through the hallways. I need to be somewhere where that's possible.
I love the fact that you created like your own musical in that moment.
Yeah, and I used to have these thoughts, like recurring thoughts of what would it be like if everyone was just so free and
Hmm.
freely expressed. And then the other ones were there were pressure points that happened where the company I was working for went through a major merger and they were laying off a lot of people. My boss loved me and wanted to keep me on board, though I also saw it as an opening to exit because he was needing to fire a bunch of people. And I thought, well, if I volunteer to exit and take a package, then I've
Hmm.
got that going for me. But before that happened, during that merger, there were new people who came in to work in our team. And I had a couple of experiences, which I actually haven't thought of for a while, but there was one individual in particular who felt he was above me, even though I had been assigned the role to follow up with his work that he was doing. And he did not like that. And so I very vividly remember being treated in this subordinate way that felt suffocating. And it was just part of the system. And I knew that system wasn't going to change because I had a boss who was amazing and he had my back. But it was something systemically in that organizational structure that was out of my control that I would need to live with. So that was another kind of marker for me. And then there was another marker where I looked around the department and all of the people who I worked with, and I thought, these bosses who are in the highest positions in this company, do I actually see myself wanting that? And the answer was a hard no. I did not want my future to
Hmm.
look like that. I didn't see myself there. So it was radical honesty step by step. And it was really the cumulative effect of all of those things together where that honesty kind of overrode any fear that I had. So it became more painful to stay in the same spot than to just take the leap.
Yeah, you started asking yourself the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, interestingly enough, so many women, so many powerful women that I've seen and I've been able to talk with, they don't even realize that they can ask themselves the questions. They feel as though this is the way it goes and this is the way that it should be. And there's this level of this, or this whisper in the back that's the whisper of unfulfillment, and they just have to make the sacrifice. It's that sacrifice thing that women wear like an albatross around their neck, that they feel as though they don't deserve that part of their life. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you did it your own way. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you have to atomic bomb your life. It means maybe that you just need to facilitate some sort of or make some space for your passion
Yes.
because isn't that really the key? That's the key here. Now,
Yeah.
with you, your calling was so strong, and this is what I'm hearing,
Mhm.
that you're like, I'm starting to ask myself the questions that I already know the answers to.
Yes.
And when that happens, then you know it's time, right?
Yes. And to your point about making space for the passions, the way it worked for me too at that time in my life was so I was working 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, like many around me did. And at 5 o'clock, I would walk home and then I would be auditioning for things or going to a rehearsal. Like I created that space for my outlet
Hmm.
that I was passionate about, but it got to the point where I couldn't do both anymore. And I think that's another guidepost too, is like when you really give to yourself in all the ways that you can, as you said, creating at least that space where you have the creative outlet and expression already lined up, and then that it's not sustainable. For me, that's another
Hmm.
guidepost of, okay, it's time for change.
That's a huge knock on the head, right? To
Yes.
like the epiphany to do that. I love this journey story because it encapsulates the entire process that needs to happen in terms of understanding that you're starting on a path that may not be your own.
Yes.
Understanding and then not demonizing it or not thinking that you're wasting your time, but accepting it for what it is and then accepting the learning process along the way. In the process of doing that, what happens is there's an expansive level of awareness that comes in. Perhaps and hopefully at that time, you can also hear your intuitive
Mhm.
force a little more clearly and
Yes.
believe it, especially with women. The interesting part about it is the intuition in women is so incredibly strong that it gets women a lot of times to overthink things because it sometimes is contrary to the path that they're on to the point where they feel as though, am I doing this to sabotage myself? Or where is this coming from? Because they don't trust the intuitive voice, right?
Yeah, in my experience in building my relationship with intuition, the overthinking comes from fear and it comes from then, as you said, second guessing the intuition because there are these fears that come up. So
Mhm.
it's a process of becoming very discerning about what voice is the intuitive voice and which one is the saboteur
Yes.
or the voice of fear. And once there's that clarity, it's a lot easier to follow the intuition because you can make a distinction between what voice is really the calling that has a sense of expansion and forward movement, and which is the voice that is causing confusion or the wheels to start spinning, second guessing, self doubt, self sacrifice is like the
Oh,
kuba of them all.
yes.
That's the outcome of all of these thoughts that stem from fear. So for me, the deepening of my relationship with intuition and being able to follow it is getting very clear about my fear as well. And then that is liberating. That's
It
very
is very, and it's, and like you said, and I completely agree, it's a rigorous process. You have to commit to it,
yes.
especially if you've been living in a system where you've really suppressed everything about that, which
Mhm,
happens a lot with women.
mhm.
So, in the process of doing that, you decided to listen to that intuitive voice. I could argue that you manifested the fact that they were laying off people and you're like, oh, yeah, I got a good package. You could have.
Yeah. I have more to say about that point specifically, especially because it's also in response to this thought or idea that a lot of us have where we think we've wasted our time doing something that wasn't totally aligned. When I look back on my life now, I see all of that was exactly meant to happen in the exact timing that it did. And I can tell you why. During those years, I think I worked for that big corporation for 3 or 4 years. And for 2 of those years, I was just dreaming, like feeling this calling, feeling this pull and working on my fears, reading books like Conversations with God or Celestine Prophecies.
Oh, I
Like,
love Celestine Prophecy.
wasn't that a great book?
That actually got me into what I'm doing.
What, sorry?
That actually is the book that got me into doing this.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pivotal for me too.
Pivotal. Yeah.
Pivotal
Yeah.
for talk about a way to highlight how to be in conversation with our intuition. That
Mm-hmm.
was game changing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had been dreaming and scheming for 2 years and that merger happened, it was exactly the time that I had internally made the decision. And I will say that often I've seen this later in my life and with other people too. It's like when we grapple with the decision of taking that leap is it's often the hardest part, but once we make the decision, life responds. And that's when I got the package to
Mm-hmm.
move. And also that job that I had for 3 years allowed me to buy property, and very modest in Calgary, but that gave me a financial freedom and foundation from a young age that lasted throughout my artistic career, where I could live later, much later. I started to be able to live off of my income from real estate investment. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would have never been able to make that investment if I didn't have that job and be able to get a mortgage. So I think it's really important to highlight, as you have already, like the judgments we can have about wasting our time or thinking, oh, I'm on the wrong path, when maybe we're exactly where we need to be
Yeah.
for reasons we can't see yet.
Exactly. For the reasons we cannot see yet. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've talked to somebody that is going through this life transition dilemma, thoughts, understanding that they're not where they need to be.
Mhm.
And the first impulse is to blow it all up again and just it would be like you not having that foundation and not having that job and then just getting out of art school and moving to New York and living in a flat with 27 people and then doing chalk art on the sidewalk for a couple bucks. I personally have always been a fan of creating a foundation
Mhm.
that you can work from. And everybody has one already to start. And it's a matter of not taking a sledgehammer to the, now you can take a sledgehammer to the house, right? That you've already built because it doesn't work for you,
Mhm.
but keep the foundation as it is and then make certain modifications to build the house that you want.
Absolutely.
And
So,
that's exactly what you did.
yes, I love the house metaphor
Mm.
because once you have the foundation, you can design how you want
Yeah.
the rest of it. You can decorate how you want the rest of it. And also tying that metaphor into financial stability, it is for me part of the foundation. I find it much more difficult to live my greatest creative expression if I'm in fight or flight, wondering where is my money going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
And so, why suffer that way? Why not have a foundation that can offer longevity and support with more ease, and to build that and to design that so that we can be our freest selves. And when we are our freest selves, we have a deeper connection to intuition. We're not in that contracted state of being that's
Yeah.
afraid.
I could not agree more. I'm a big Maslow guy, Maslow
Oh,
hierarchy of
yeah.
needs, and it's food and shelter and all that are needs. And if you don't have that secured in some form or fashion, then you will live in a heightened state of anxiety, even perhaps fear that you won't be able to pay your bills. You won't be able to get a good meal every single day. And if your energy is going towards that, it's not going towards your expansion.
Right. Yeah. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
It's growth or death, growth or death.
It really, and I'm not an either or type of a thinker, a black or white type of a thinker, but when it comes to that, when it comes to where your energy is going,
Mhm.
is it going to your expansion or is it going to your survival? And that's why I personally think it's such an important component to growth to have a foundation to work off of. Do not atomic bomb the foundation you're on to start brand new and over. That's a lot of work. It's possible, and I know there are some women who have done that, but man, it's just a lot of extra work. And if you have something to work from, why not do that? So we're wrapping it up towards the end of the show. Your book is written so you take one word out of the dictionary and you expound on it with your poetry.
Mhm.
And there's probably what, like 100 words ish, give or take, or
70. There's
70?
7
Okay. And
kids.
I think it'd be great to just pick the book up every single morning, go to one of them, and just focus on one of the sayings and one of the words for the day. It's like a word of the day, but it's very profound. I just loved it. I picked out a couple, and I'm wondering if you could expound on those because I think it really works with what we're talking about today.
Yes.
So the first one is calling. What did you? I would like you to read it.
Great. I'm all for it.
Okay.
So, a calling is an invisible cord wrapped around your chest, tethered to the stars, pulling you toward your destiny to shine. A calling is an ecstatic magnetism between the freedom of formlessness and the fulfillment of form.
How do you feel a calling is necessary? How was it necessary in your journey, and how is it necessary in a woman really expanding in her life?
For me, the calling is the core of everything in how we move forward because the calling is the internal sense that we know and feel, but we don't always have a picture for what that's going to look like. And our culture is very much outcome oriented. So we're taught, even in manifesting education or spiritual education, to manifest things that we can dream up with our minds. The calling to me is deeper than that. It's beyond the mind and it's something we feel in our soul. That part of us that we know we're feeling it when we're connecting to it because there's a sense of such incredible expansion and also a sense of formlessness. I think of it like the black hole where
Mhm,
anything is possible. It's like the womb where something can come from nothing.
mhm.
It's that space that does not yet have form, but that has an energy signature of some kind that we can commune with and get to know deeply and follow it in its subtle whispers as we take every tiny step in life. And that's all we can do. We can't really plan with a calling, just like we started this call with
Mhm,
this
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
a plan. Sure, we can have a structure, but the real true ingredient of any act of becoming and being in our fullest light and expression of that light, it's all rooted in the calling.
Exactly, and it's having the courage to
Yes.
be able to open yourself up to listen to it because I feel as though the calling is screaming loudly always, and it's a matter of rising yourself above the din of the everyday and of the mundane and being able to dial into the frequency of your calling, having the courage to do that too, because again, that's where the fear comes in to keep people set to where they're at. But again, it's like a hermit crab. A hermit crab, it keeps growing, and the reason they call it a hermit crab is it's not born with a shell; it's got to find one. And so if it stays in that little shell and it keeps growing, it becomes extremely uncomfortable.
Mm.
But the thing is, it has to, in order to find the new shell, it has to shed the old one and be extremely vulnerable to
Mhm.
be able to
Great.
go out, right? To be able to
Mhm.
go out and find the new, bigger shell. And that's the calling, is saying, you are super uncomfortable in this shell. Get out and go get a new one. And then you have to have the courage, which you state in your book, which I think is fantastic.
Mhm.
Courage is the triumph of being yourself.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
It's perfectly
It is.
encapsulates what it is.
Yes, it really is that triumph of being ourselves.
The last one I'd like you to read is almost like we said, the antithesis of the calling, which is duty.
Yes. Duty is being reliable to others at the expense of being reliable to yourself. Duty is like thick Spanish tile, robust, sturdy, earthy. It's been tried and tested for years. However, its uncrackable history leaves you with an inherited foundation that is not your chosen dwelling. Duty is a corset with cords of obligation pulled so tightly around your ribs you don't even know your true body shape anymore. Duty is performed under the banner of love, loyalty, and care, yet the banner can fall upon you like a blindfold that keeps your desires in the dark. Duty has broad shoulders, a robust, thick torso, and wears twill knee-high skirts with long sleeve cardigans. When Duty enters a room, she moves like a large ship berthing into a harbor, slow and steady. Duty's 10,000-year-old birthday is coming up, but she's not keen on celebrating. Even though she's the first to bring a gift to anyone else's birthday party, she's simply too tired to think about her own. Ever since Duty was a child, her greatest fear has been not knowing who she is without all the things she does. Nearly every day, guilt comes to visit Duty for morning coffee as she writes out her to-do list. While Duty can't stand how guilt rambles on with endless monologues about what she should do and why, Duty listens anyway because she believes guilt must have the answers. Duty's second worst fear is being called selfish. Luckily for Duty, her neighbor, Self Love, demonstrates that she won't die if she doesn't do all that's expected of her. In fact, she might just find herself having the time of her life while whirling around on the teacup ride at Disneyland instead of yanking out the weeds in her backyard. What Duty is so close to discovering is that it's easier than she thinks to save herself from the waterlogged weight of 1,000 inherited agreements that she never chose for herself in the first place. All she needs to do is say, nope, no can do, no explanations needed.
She thinks she has to save herself from the waterlogged weight of 1,000 inherited agreements she never chose for herself.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
These unconscious things we take on because we think that's what makes us good and valuable in the world. Nope.
Right? And especially with women.
Yes.
It's part of the system, I'm sorry to say. And the part that I've seen throughout and as a man raising my daughter and looking back, retroactively seeing how things are and how she was treated and how she was in school and the expectations, the differing expectations.
Mhm.
You can see that from a mile away, that it's the expectations for girls and for women are different.
Yes.
And it restricts the level of being able to hear the calling. It restricts the level of being authentic. It restricts and I'm not victimizing the gender. I'm just saying that in seeing it now, you're like, no wonder. No
Yeah.
wonder there are the issues out there. No wonder why I see so many incredibly powerful women sitting across from me,
Mhm.
knowing that they have these amazing forces around them and they could tap into these, and they're sitting there in their little tiny shell saying, I don't know about this, I don't know about that, I don't know about this, second guessing themselves and relying on others expectations. And you're like, oh my god, I can't be, which is the most frustrating thing. But the least frustrating thing is when they do actually start to see what the duty is, and then start to see what the calling is, and then have the courage to make the move.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, these moments where we can easily find ourselves in self sacrifice, it's not threaded through our environment that women have had a different construct to prove our value, to show value. And we've followed that dutifully in order to prove ourselves. And part of that has been self sacrifice. This is a huge overgeneralization.
Mm-hmm.
However, in that act of self sacrifice, what I find to be the most empowering part of it all is that it really all boils down to a choice. Like, we can say no. It's that easy.
It is.
And the hard part is the guilt.
Yeah.
The guilt can be also a doorway for empowerment if we can see that our desires matter more than having loyalty to the desires of others, which is a lot of where we can gain value from.
You can't face that reality unless you make that choice first.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you're like, uh-oh, oh no. But then when you're in the oh no and the uh-oh, then you're faced with it. And then a lot of times that brings up yourself, that brings up the authenticity, that brings up the patterns that you can see. And then there's a self-realization that you're like, wait, what am I doing?
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can't get there unless you say no. And then those consequences that you feel as though that are instant death end
Hmm.
up not being that way and end up being very freeing. It's baptism by fire almost.
Yes. And that's where it's the triumph of being ourselves.
Yep.
We can be true to that hard no and wild yes.
Mhm.
And we get the satisfaction of living who we truly are and who we're meant to be, which is
That's it.
the best gift in the world.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Rhia Kujat, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's a perfect ending, right?
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. The book is Life's Poetic Glossary. And you also have a number of things on the website. You have other books. You have, I believe you facilitate a program. Can you talk about that or where people can find you?
Sure. So the best place to find me is my website, which is my author name, Krista Kujat. And I have free audios there that you can download. And they're really just gentle reflections to reconnect with your heart and get out of your mind. And then I have another couple of books that are upcoming that I'm working on now. So at the moment, the audios are what I'm offering, and I'm not currently working one-on-one with people, but I will be in the future. So
Awesome. And
that's,
we'll keep
yeah.
track of that. And I will make sure I put that in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you.
Most definitely. And then for me, it's always theconfidencedoc.com. You can get a hold of me. You can ask me questions. You can do whatever you want. And if you have any questions, again, it's Tony@theconfidencedoc.com. Thanks a lot. Again, Rhia, I really appreciate it. That was super fun. It's going to be really hard to edit this down.
I had a
Really.
blast. Thank you so much, Tony.
It was a blast. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you next week.